Hey, Algebra 2 family, Coach Emmons here. So the first thing that we need you to do today is this activating strategy. We really need you to have some good sense of factoring, and I know a lot of us struggle with it, but we need to know that you understand how to factor. So we're just going to kind of go back over the basics. So if this is the first time you're watching this video, go ahead and pause the video, try these three problems, and then I'm going to work them out for you. I think would be helpful in this situation. So pause the video and try those three, and then go ahead and press play. Okay, so on this first one, I'm going to probably use the factoring method, like the big X and the box method, okay? Or if you like the slip and slide method, we're also going to go over that one as well, because I know a lot of us are like, I got lost in the box, it's okay. All right, so the first thing that you want to do is you want to identify your A, B, and C terms. So my A term is going to be whatever's attached to this squared exponent. My B is going to be whatever number's in front of this R to the first power. And my C is going to be this number that's J chilling by itself over here. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is so I need to find my A times C, which is going to give me -8. And my B term, which is going to be 7, okay? And I need two factors of -8 that if I add them together, I'm going to get 7, okay? So if I multiply, I get -8, but if I add it together, I'm going to get 7, okay? So think of our factors of -8. Ooh, I don't know why I put a 9 there. -8, I've got -1, I've got -2, I've got -4, I've got 8, and I could have positive or negative either of these, right? Okay, so if I add 2 and 4 together, that's not going to make 7. But what about 1 and 8? Yeah, I can do that. If I make the 1 negative and the 8 positive, okay? If this X freaks you out, just write it this way. I've got what plus what will give me 7, and what times what will give me -8. And these two numbers will have to be the same here and here and here and here. Okay, so just like what we did, -1 and 8 and -1 and 8. Both of these statements have to be true in order for you to have those two numbers. Okay, so for my box people, you're going to draw the box. Beautiful box. Okay, and the first term in your original equation is going to go in this first box. Right? And this last term is going to go in that last box. And these two terms that you just found, you're going to put back on the R, and you're going to put them here and here. It doesn't matter which way you put it. You can flip them. That's okay too. But notice how if you add all this stuff together, you're going to get your original equation. Okay? If you don't, then you did something wrong. So you should be able to write this back out and simplify, and it should be this equation. Okay? So now we're going to pull out our greatest common factor from each row and column. So from this column right here, my greatest common factor between r squared and -1. Well, they both have a 1 in common, but that doesn't really help me much. But they also share an r. So they have a 1r that they both share. Over here, we've got 8r and -8. Well, they both don't have an r, but they both have an 8 in common. So we can pull out an 8. From this row right here, we're going to do r squared and 8r. Now, a lot of you get a little confused with this part. You really need to find a number that if you multiply beside, like this side against this side, you get whatever in the box. So r times what would give me r squared? Well, r times r would give me r squared. Well, let's check and make sure it works for this box over here. 8 times r gives me 8r. Yeah, that's right. Okay? So down here, we're going to think of a number that what times r gives me -1r? Well, -1. Let's make sure it works for this box. -1 times 8 gives me -8. So I would write out my factors, which are on the sides and the top, r plus 8 and r minus 1. Now, this problem only asks me to factor, so I would leave this in factored form right here. If it said solve, that's when we would actually set it equal to 0 and solve. Okay? So you need to, at this point, be able to do this. Okay? If you're like, I don't like the box, that's okay. Well, let me show you the slip and slide method. It's pretty quick and easy. Actually, I'm gonna bring that back. Sorry. Okay, it's pretty easy. You still have to do this whole X method, but once you get to the X, you're gonna take what your A term is. Your A right now is 1. So I'm gonna divide both of these by 1. If I divide these by 1 and I get a whole number, then all I'm going to do is take R and bring that whole number down. So -1 divided by 1 is -1. And 8 divided by 1 is +8. Boom, done. Okay? Now, if it wasn't a whole number, then we'd have to do some finagling. And we're actually going to see that, I think, a little bit farther down. So that would be the slip and slide method. Okay? All right, so now on this next one, a lot of you have an issue with this. So we've got this difference of perfect squares. So perfect square is something that if you multiply it by itself, you'll get a number. And those numbers are called our perfect square numbers. And if I list out some of them, you might recognize this list. Your teacher always puts this on the board and you're like, I don't know what this means. Well, 1 times 1, or 1 squared, gives me 1. 2 squared gives me 4. 3 squared gives me 9. 4 squared gives me 16, etc. Okay, so this is just talking about perfect squares. Well, now when we say the word difference, we're talking about subtraction. Okay, so we did solving by square roots is what we called this one. Since there is no B term, there's no B term. You see how there's nothing that has an X term? We're missing this term. Okay, since there's no B term, all we have to do on this one is set it equal to 0 and then solve. Okay, and so what I mean by that is and let's say for instance it didn't say just factor, it actually said solve the following expressions completely. We would add 25 to the other side. We would get 4x squared equals 25. We would divide both sides by 4. We'd get x squared equals 25 over 4. And then we would take the square root of both sides. Okay, so let's take the square root of both sides. So that's going to give me x equals positive and negative. I'm going to take the square root of the top, square root of the bottom, and I get 5 halves. Okay? Now, obviously this is solving. So that doesn't really help us since we're just factoring, right? Okay, so let's talk about the actual factoring piece. So that was solving by square roots, but we actually got to do the factoring piece, okay? So in order to factor this, we are going to look at the perfect square fact. So if I took the square root of 4, I would get 2, right? And if I took the square root of 25, I'd get 5, right? So when it says difference of perfect squares, what we're going to do is we're going to have a 2x plus 5, and we're going to have a 2x minus 5. Okay, so we took the square root of both of these, and we said, all right, let's throw an x right beside that one, an x right beside that, and change the signs on both of them. Okay, because if we multiply this back out, I'll show it to you. There's this middle term that actually disappears. Okay, so you see this negative 10x plus 10x, that cancels out, and you have 4x squared minus 25. Okay, so this is your factored form. All right, but most of the time when we're asking about these kind of problems, they're going to say solve. Okay, but in this case, if we're just factoring, we're going to take the square root of both sides, or square root of both of these terms, and write it out this way. Okay? All right. Now on this one, this first term scares me, since we would have to factor, and that I don't know any factors of 72, but we can try it. Let's try it. So the first thing that you always want to do when you have these kind of problems is you want to try factoring. So you're going to do the x. Okay, so x, and a times c is going to give us 72. And our b is going to be 38. All right, so I'm sitting here and I'm going, I don't know factors of 72 that well, but let me list out the ones that I do know. Well, I know 8 and 9, and I know 1 and 72. But I also know 2 times something will give me 72. But I'm not really sure which one it would be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a quick trick to put into your graphing calculator so that you can make sure that you know the factors of 72. Give me 1 second. So when you go into your graphing calculator, you're going to hit this y equals button. You're going to hit the y equals button. And then you're going to type the number that you're trying to find. So in our case, 72 divided by x. Okay, and I'm going to show you that too. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to hit y equals, and I'm going to hit 72 divided by x. And I'm going to hit second graph, and that's going to pull up the table of all of my factors. Well, 2 times 36 gives me 72. Fantastic. Well, that's it, because I need something that if I add together, I'm going to get 38. Okay? I don't just know these off the top of my head. Sometimes I actually do have to look them up. Okay? So now we're going to actually use the box, and we're going to put our first term in the first box and our last term in the last box. And those 2 terms I just found, I'm going to put a V onto them, and I'm going to put them inside the box as well. And now's the time that everybody stresses over. We're going to pull out the greatest common factor. Well, what about 8 and 36? Well, I know they both share a 2, and I think they both share a 4. Okay, so 4 times 9 gives me 36. Good. All right, but they both share a V, so 4V. Over here, 2 and 9. Well, they don't really share many things in common. So 1 is their greatest common factor. Well, now I need to think through. All right, what number times 4V will give me 8V squared? Well, 4 times 2 gives me 8, and I need another V there because V times V gives me V squared. Let's check and make sure that works for the other box. 2V times 1 gives me 2V. And now I need to think about this one. 4V times what will give me 36? Well, that's 9. Okay, so now I'm going to take everything that's on the outside and write it out in factored form. You're sitting there and you're like, but coach, I don't want to do the box. Okay, that's fine. So let's try the slip and slide method. So once we get here, we're going to take our A term, divide both of these by A. Well, that's not going to give me a whole number. But I can simplify this guy, right? So this is actually going to give me 1/4, but it's still not a whole number. So we're going to take the number that's on the bottom, move it to the front, put an X beside it, or a V in this case, and then add this number right here. So that's going to look like 4V plus 1. Over here, well, this isn't going to give me a whole number either, but we can divide both of these by 4. So if we divide both of those by 4, we're going to get 9 over, I'm sorry, I should have changed colors, 9 over 2. And this is not a whole number, so we're going to take what's on the bottom, move it to the front, slap a V next to it, and then add whatever number's on top. Notice how these 2 parentheses are the same thing as this guy right here. So whichever method is easier for you, do that. It's okay to hate the box, but it's not okay to get these things wrong. Okay? So I'll catch you in the next video.